Hi, I'm Greg. I'm the lead singer for Lipstick Generation.
And I'm Steve, the bassist.
And welcome to the Lipstick Panel. Today on the Lipstick Panel, we are recording on a Holy Sunday because all Sundays are holy according to Christians. That's right, Steve just got back from church, I just got back from sleeping in, and we are talking about a Stryper album today on the Lipstick Panel. We're talking about the first Stryper full-length album, Soldiers Under Command, and we have a special guest with us. Guess who? You'll be so surprised with who our special guest is. We got Victor Krause back on the show. Somehow he was available.
Welcome, Victor.
Can you believe it?
Where did you just get back from?
From making breakfast.
Okay. After church?
Greg, you will be... technically after church. I didn't go, but it's probably done. Greg, you'll be happy to know that I specifically made my availability at my new job not have Sundays so that I could be on this podcast as often as you need me.
So, should we just have you on every week then?
Just co-host Victor.
Yeah, and I'll just be in the band.
I mean, yeah, that's all right. So, congratulations to our new lead vocalist, Victor Krause.
Hey.
Welcome to... Appropriate for this episode. So yeah, Stryper. So the way that our show works, if it's your first time listening, welcome. We do swear on the show, so if your Christian ears might be offended by swearing, perhaps turn off the program.
How can blessing and cursing come from the same mouth? How can both sweet and bitter water come from the same fountain? I'm also going to be misquoting a lot of Bible verses on this episode, probably.
Probably. So
Gonna try not to commit blasphemy this time, though.
So the Lipstick Panel is a weekly ranking show where we rank songs and albums. So we're going to find out what the best song on this album is according to the panel. But first we're going to go around and talk about our histories with the band and this album in particular. And I guess Jesus, if you want to go there. So I will go first, since I'm probably the only person in this group who actually listens to Stryper on a semi-regular basis. So, my first knowledge of Christian music, mainstream Christian music, was largely from the South Park episode where they were making fun of how bad Christian music is.
I wanna get down on my knees and start pleasing Jesus.
And being a impressionable young teenager, I just thought, man, Christian music is lame because South Park made fun of it, and I'm just going to take what I hear from pop culture at face value.
Yeah, all right.
And then I was watching a VH1 special on metal music, and they started talking about Stryper. And they were playing some of their music, and they're a Christian band, and they dress in yellow and black. And I heard some of their music, this band sounds kind of awesome. But wait a minute, I thought Christian music was lame. This band sounds pretty cool. So I went out, and I decided I'm going to buy a Stryper CD, because they sounded pretty cool. And so I bought a Stryper Greatest Hits along with a Thin Lizzy Greatest Hits. One of those bands elevated into my holy trinity, my top 3 of favorite bands, and the other band was Stryper, which still a great band. I've loved the band for years. I don't have the entire discography on CD, but I've got a good half of it.
Aren't you friends with Michael Sweet, Greg?
I'm not friends with Michael Sweet. I mean, I know him, but I'm not friends with him, which I will get into. I've only seen Stryper proper live once, caught a Bible at their show, because they throw Bibles into the crowd. That was one of their stage gimmicks. So I have a Bible with a Stryper sticker pasted on top, because they want to remind you that, hey, love Jesus, but also buy our CDs. So I have my Stryper Bible at home, a prized possession. And, but, they've been a musical influence, a band I've been a fan of for years, and recently we got the honor of opening for Michael Sweet, the lead singer for Stryper, at the Rockin' Pod Expo.
Woo!
And,
oh, hell yeah.
And that was very cool for me because Billy Morris, who played guitar on the first Lipstick album and played guitar in Lipstick 2 also, he's sort of like my musical blood brother in a lot of ways. And, he got to open for Michael Sweet a few months before we did, and talked about what a great experience it was, because he grew up a Stryper fan and loved the band. And, the fact that I can be miles apart from one of my best buddies, but we can share that bonding experience of both, opening up for a mutual musical hero, was honestly that for me was cooler than opening up for Michael Sweet, which don't get me wrong, it was a huge honor because I've been a fan of him for years, and to like be, in that same peer category is very awesome and very cool. But for me, it was cooler that I got to like share that bonding experience with my friend who, lives states away, but we were still able to like bond over that and talk about that later was cool. And Michael Sweet, the lead singer and main songwriter for Stryper, and also one of the lead guitarists. He sings and plays lead guitar for the band, dual guitar band. Very nice guy. I've met him a couple different times, and he's always been very cordial, very friendly. We hung out a little bit at Rockin' Pod. He said hi to me in the hallways after our set. Just an absolute gentleman, an absolute sweetheart. One of the nicest guys in the industry. Everyone who has worked with him that I've, met has had nothing but nice things to say. So good dude, who makes some good music. Timothy Gaines, the bassist from Stryper, I'm Facebook friends with. And, he posts a lot of far-right memes that I'm not really a fan of, but also he's no longer in the band, and I guess there's some personnel issues. I think that some of the stuff he says, we'll get into this later as to, what a Christian artist's role is in the Christian community, but in my opinion, if you are a Christian band preaching the gospel, you should try to set an example for other Christians and try to live the most Christian life that you reasonably can. And I feel like some of the things he says undermines the message of the band and isn't necessarily good for, spreading the gospel, which is, I think, the band's intent in many ways, is to spread the gospel while rocking. Yeah. But this album, it's good. It's not one of my favorite Stryper albums. I think they get better as they go on. I think there's some great standout cuts. But I think just like, they're a band that, started off very good, but then just got better as time went on. So let's move over to Victor. Let's mix it up. We'll go with Steve last.
Ooh.
All right. So I think had maybe heard the name Stryper before, probably said by Greg. But I was not familiar with the music until this very week. In fact, I've been brought on late to some Lipstick episodes in my day, but this was about as late as you can go. Greg asked me on Friday if I wanted to be on this Sunday morning episode, so I didn't have as much time to prepare as I normally like. But I would say I generally enjoyed myself listening to this album, and as a youth, I was brought up in a Christian household, and I even went to a Christian private school. And that was around the time of, maybe kind of late into the period of Tooth and Nail's heyday.
Yeah.
So I wasn't into like their full catalog, but there are actually probably 3 or 4, maybe even 5 bands that I got from that catalog that I still listen to this day.
Everybody respects Zayo. Were they Tooth and Nail? I actually don't know.
That one doesn't sound familiar to me. The most notable for me being Project 86 and nice. Neon Horse. I throw them on playlists every once in a while just to see what people say, because the guy's voice is really weird. So there was a lot of that, but I didn't get into all of it because I think, as we all know, there is a little bit of an unfair double standard when it comes to Christian bands, which is sort of like, yeah, you're Christian, but what else you got? And like, it's maybe not fair because that, like, secular bands don't really get that, but if you ask that question, there are a lot of Christian bands whose answer is actually nothing. So yeah, band,
I think it's a fair question to ask a Christian band, much like Christian bands and comedy bands are bands where it's like all about substance over style sometimes, and you really need just like good songs and not just the gospel or jokes.
Right. And I think Stryper, for whatever you might say about Christian bands, at large, Stryper can at least answer the question of what else you got, because these guys can rip.
Yeah, and I want to add one more thing, because I just realized I didn't really address it, but Stryper is a band that has been known for opening the doors for Christian hard rock and metal, for like pushing that into the mainstream, for being like the first band to really take that step forward and to make it acceptable and cool. There was Petra before that, but Stryper was the band that opened it to like heavier bands. And I will say that Stryper, for me, opened the door to listening to a bunch of Christian artists where I might have been closed-minded before, but now if like a band is Christian, it's not an immediate, oh, I won't listen to that, that's lame. It's like, yeah, let me check out the songs and judge it based upon the quality of the material. So, wanted to add that in, that this was a huge gateway band for a bunch of different artists for me. Steve, what's your experience with Stryper, Jesus, Christian artists? What's your history with this? And, how'd you like opening for Michael Sweet?
Right. So I, too, grew up in a Christian household. And I wasn't, although this was the 90s, I wasn't one of those Christian households where, my parents were very strict about only listening to Christian music. They encouraged us to listen to Christian music, and we listened to a lot of it, but it wasn't an exclusive thing. But I also grew up in the 90s, where it was all about alt-rock and grunge are the coolest things ever. So I didn't listen to exclusively Christian music, but I also didn't really listen to hair metal, because this was, the 90s when hair metal was lame. So my dad had a copy of Soldiers Under Command lying around the house, and I was aware of Stryper. I knew of them as that Christian metal band. And I was just like, never got around to listening to them. And then, as I grew up, I continued to listen to a variety of Christian musics, and was, I got into more heavy music. Then I was like, well, let me listen to some like As I Lay Dying or some Zao. And then as I grew even older and grew disillusioned with Christian music, I was like, well, As I Lay Dying dude tried to murder his wife. That's not cool. Zao still, I guess they're still pretty legit. But I, drifted away from listening to much Christian music. And then Greg was like, okay, now we need to listen to Stryper. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to do that. Basically, these days I mostly only listen to Christian music that is good music independently. So whatever Five Iron Frenzy is up to. But opening for Stryper was pretty cool. I had a lot of fun at that show. And, it's neat to be able to say that we opened for, I guess... Wait, yeah, sorry, just Michael Sweet, right?
Right, just Michael Sweet. But, still, he's the guy who writes all the songs for Stryper. Like, he's the guy. It's like, well, we didn't open for Smashing Pumpkins, we opened for Billy Corgan.
Right. So, yes, I meant to listen to this album more than one time. I listened to it once and I was like, I got the end.
So, general thoughts on Stryper, would you say they're a talented band? Like, the question is, with Victor saying, what else you got? Would you say they've got the what else?
The trick is, at least based on this one album, they're pretty fundamentally a hair metal type band, which is a genre I don't generally go for, and they're just a little more corny than your average hair metal band, which makes it even harder to listen to.
Oh, man. So, but,
So I don't hate it, but it's not going to be my go-to.
Yeah, so as the resident, fan who has familiarity with a good chunk of the catalog, what I would say is, remember, this is when they're still young. Like, all they'd released before this was an EP, which, an independently released EP, in the history of bands, barely counts. Like, this is their first full length. So... a bunch of kids in their, early 20s, late teens, early 20s, releasing...
22-ish.
Yeah, 22-ish. If this is your first go, and also, kind of venturing into new territory where, there wasn't really Christian metal before this album. So this is, defining a genre and doing something that really hadn't been done before, and, figuring out what is appropriate. As they've, gotten older, they've refined their craft, but I think they're still, instrumentation-wise, I think the band is already very strong, and I think, songwriting, there are absolutely a few classics on here. One of which was even played at Rockin' Pod. So some of the material stands up, and some of it is like, hey, we're young and still figuring things out. But I think for a first release, compare this to your first album.
To be fair, I recorded my first album when I was 15.
All right, so compare this to to where you're at age like 21.
I was self-producing, and it was still pretty rough.
So, I mean, but also think about like the level of musicianship, like the vocal ability, the guitar playing, all that stuff. Like for dudes in their early 20s, and to rebel against the Sunset Strip hedonism, which is all just like, yeah, partying and girls, and like, we're just gonna talk about Jesus for a while, and how it's good to wait till you're married to have sex.
Partying with Jesus and girls.
I mean, I think it's a bold artistic statement, and I think, something to be proud of. So I would say, for a first full length, I would say it's not an embarrassing debut. Because, I mean, a lot of bands, like, their first albums are rough. Like, I think this is a stronger debut than Gish. In terms of what the band was going for, I would say this is a stronger album overall. But now we have a little bit of a debate on the panel we need to get into.
Yeah.
So
as if that is.
Would you mind if I put in one last thought I had in my opening paragraph?
Yes,
here?
of course.
So, while I was listening to this frantically while making breakfast before work yesterday, I I remembered something that Greg has said a few times on this podcast, which is that sort of a general definition of hair metal or glam could be knowing that something is ridiculous and doing it anyway. And I think that is an ethos that Christian music, like, for better or worse, actually does as a whole. And that makes this album extremely glam or hair metal-ish. And it technically makes all Christian music glam.
Oh, so Five Iron French is a glam band, dude. So is unfortunately As I Lay Dying.
Yeah.
they're the Gary Glitter of what?
the metalcore subset of glam.
Right.
Rose. Attack, my favorite glam band.
Sorry to cut you off, Greg, but I wanted to get to that point while it was still semi-relevant.
No, I appreciate that. I think that's a very good point to bring up. So we had a panelist who sent us in his ranking and was not able to make it. We don't know why. We haven't heard from him. So Nate from The Plug with Bushy and the Mountain Man sent us his ranking, but is not here. And his ranking completely changes the panel ranking. And so, in the past, we've had panelists provide us their ranking when they couldn't make it, or like provide us their ranking and then last minute couldn't make it, and we've had the ranking on the show, but I've also received like notes and commentary when they've done that. We don't have Nate's notes and commentary, and it's a very different ranking where, in traditional Lipstick panel fashion, most episodes where Victor is on a song he ranks in the middle ends up as number 1. That is the case with Nate's ranking. But without Nate's ranking, a song that Victor ranked high actually wins the vote. So, do we go with Nate's ranking, or do we not go with Nate's ranking? What do you guys think?
Here's what I think. I think we should, for the purposes of the actual episode, not include it, and then in the wrap-up segment, compare it to how it would have gone.
That's a good way to do it. I feel like if we don't have his notes, then we don't have his reasoning as to why he ranked things the way they are, and that's sort of a major part of the point of things, is for people to explain what their thought process is as to why they sorted songs in a specific way.
You know, I think that's a good idea. So we'll reveal what the alternate ranking would have been at the end. And honestly, I think it's probably a better ranking if I'm just like looking at it. I'm like, yeah, that makes more sense. But you know what? Let's do the weird 3 of us ranking.
Yeah.
You say it's the weird 3 of us ranking, but like Victor and I are pretty close to spot on. It's only you that's all over the place, Greg.
I mean, it's only me who's, the guy
who listens to the genre and this band in specific.
Right.
The fool and coward.
The fool and coward who, specifically owns this band on CD and owns a Stryper Bible.
Stryper is a word. I already made that joke.
Right?
Would you like me to make that joke as well?
Yes, please. Please steal my jokes, Victor.
A Stryble. You could call it a Stryble.
All right. Well, hey, it's been decided we're going to use the trio ranking, and then at the end we'll reveal what the alternate universe ranking is. So
the Lipstick Generation podcast, or the Lipstick Panel extended universe.
Right. So coming in as the least best song on Stryper's debut album, Soldiers Under Command, we have Waiting for a Love That's Real.
I like the opening parenthetical rather than the closing parenthetical in the song title.
Well, yeah, they're a Christian band. They're doing things differently than all those secular heathen bands, man.
I'm looking at my notes and I can't find it because I left the parenthetical out. Where is it? Oh, right.
So, this one was pretty decisively ranked low by the other panelists. I put this in the middle. For me, this is... I like the organ intro to the song, and I like sort of the power pop atmosphere that the guitars have, where it's really good, major key, feel good music, and I think has some of the better verse and chorus melodies on the album. I think overall with this album, there is a little bit of struggle with some of the songwriting where I feel like the melodies are getting lost behind heavier riffs sometimes. And I think some of the songwriting suffers because of that. But I think this is a song that fits in well with the poppier, lighter side of hair metal. And it's just a really just fun, catchy song that just makes you smile when listening to it. And so I enjoyed it a lot. I don't think it's an absolute classic of the album in compared to some of the other songs which are concert staples, but I enjoy it quite a bit.
I feel like... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. We were both waiting for each other to go.
Right. No, you first.
We were both waiting for a conversation that's real.
Oh, hey-o.
I think, for me, it was kind of a lot of this album... certainly in the first time I listened to it, by the end I'd listened to it about maybe 2.5 times, doing some skimming towards the end. This one is just far enough into the album that just another riff, another good guitar solo, another okay or maybe even good chorus is that's kind of not enough for me. By the time we get to track 6, you got to really change it up in a way, and the aesthetic of the album was kind of not my favorite by this point.
So you got sweet solos. What else you got?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually a really good point in the sense that this is an album that's there's not as much dynamic contrast throughout a lot of it. It's very much we are a young band defining our sound, and a lot of bands where you listen to their first album, they're not going all over the place sonically. They're trying to say, hey, this is the general sound and vibe of the band, defining this is what Stryper is and what you can expect. So, if you compare it to, the first REM album, it's kind of, in a similar sonic space, a lot of it. So, so if you're not as big into the genre, the nuances of the songwriting aren't gonna stick out. So me, who listens to a lot of this kind of stuff, recognize, oh yeah, this is what you're doing differently. This is how you're still defining your sound, but it's spanning it in a slightly different direction. I noticed the songcraft here, I like it. But if you're not into hair metal as much, you'd be oh, it's just more hair metal.
Yeah, and the big difference is in that first REM album, you cannot understand a word, and this guy understood it all, which is a huge negative for me.
What's with all these comprehensible lyrics?
Yeah, not into it. I think another thing is I'm not against the idea of sort of opening a song with that kind of organ thing, but this specific synth organ tone I didn't like, so that didn't help either. And I think it really is if this song had been switched with one of the other similar songs in the front half of the album, maybe I would have liked it more. I just like, yeah, it didn't really do a lot for me, and just where it's placed in the album is kind of, I was a little bit done with this sound by then.
Well, I do like that organ because it's a very church sounding organ, and they're a Christian band.
It's interesting because it's like an unsubversion of the idea of using a church organ in front of a hair metal song. They like unsubverted that subversion.
Right? So, Steve, what were your thoughts on this one?
Well, I mean, I rank this really close to the bottom. Besides the obvious, it's a ballad, therefore Steve doesn't like it.
But it's not really a ballad, it's up-tempo.
It's kind of up-tempo for a ballad, but it's still pretty ballady.
It's not a ballad. It's like an up-tempo, like, pop rock song. That's like saying I Want You to Want Me is a ballad.
I mean, he's singing about a girl, therefore it's a ballad. Anyway, besides that...
Love Gun is a ballad.
No, he's definitely singing about his penis. That's a different thing. Besides, that aspect of the thing, this is also one of those ones where, like, I feel like the lyrics haven't aged very well. Obviously, 1985, Christian rock as a, something that is attempting to appeal to the secular mainstream was in its infancy, and, like, they hadn't explored a lot of, like, the nuanced takes on things, but this sort of thing where, like, a dude is singing to a woman, be like, remember, the important thing is that you protect your purity for your husband later, ladies. Like, that sort of sentiment in this modern era of, post-third wave feminism doesn't really float as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, we all know that, like, you don't need to wait until marriage to be a good Christian. You don't have to save your virginity to be a good Christian.
I mean, no, just like this sentiment would have been much better expressed in the first person. If it were just like him saying, like, that's also a much more subversive idea, just in the way society treats that sort of thing, is especially Christian culture. Is we talk to girls a lot. We tell young women, hey, it's really, your purity is really important, and we're a lot worse at telling young men, hey, your purity is also important. So if he'd phrased this as like, I'm saving myself for the right woman who God has picked for me, that's a lot better of a sentiment than she's saving herself for the right guy that God has picked for her. So
remember how I said Stryper got better? Yeah. A few albums later, they do that.
I mean, I was vaguely aware that they had songs about that.
So, like, you can hardly, I mean, once again, first album.
Right. But that said, in the context of this first album, where they're still a little bit young as songwriters, they're still a little bit raw and unrefined and need some work, that bumps this down a lot compared to some of the other songs. Like, a lot of the other songs about, like, this is, the super positive God makes life great songs that they're doing the rest of the time, like, those aged a little bit better.
I guess, well, as we're talking about refining of craft, I think lyrical craft was definitely something they, needed much more improvement on. But I think this song, in terms of, like, pop hook craft, I think they were already very strong. Like, great arrangement of harmonies and, like, excellent melodies. I think this one, for me, is definitely very strong in terms of musical composition. And then lyrically, I mean, it's a hair metal band in the 80s talking about saving yourself for marriage. How cool can you make that?
I bet Poison would have made a kick-ass power ballad about it. Also, I think that's our first
ballad.
Swear.
It's not.
Yeah, but Poison would have made it a kick-ass power ballad.
I mean, look, Poison is a great band who is nowhere near close to the musical level of Stryper in terms of technical ability. But you know what? The Beatles weren't the greatest band in terms of instrument playing, but they pulled it off. Hey, I don't know. I think this is a strong song and one of the better cuts on the album. But I mean, the rest of the panel disagrees with me.
Yep.
Speaking of the rest of the panel disagreeing with me, and next up on the list, we have Battle Hymn of the Republic, which I ranked one spot lower than Waiting for a Love That's Real.
Hey, me too. It's just that my one spot lower is last place.
So, Steve, why are you in support of slavery?
This song is a stone cold classic that Stryper just kind of butchered. It's just like an overwrought, hysteric take on it, and it just
like Jimi Hendrix's Star Spangled Banner. Like Queen's God Save the Queen.
Okay, but yeah, those were like trying to undermine the message of the song originally. I feel like this is a overwrought, unironic version of this song.
Yeah, because Stryper loves Jesus and hates slavery. I'm sorry you're so racist, Steve.
Okay, so like an overwrought Jimi Hendrix Star Spangled Banner is a protest song saying, hey, maybe we should question some of the sentiments of this song. They're doing the exact same thing with the song that they want to say, like, yeah, like fighting against slavery is a good thing. But they're delivering it in the same way that makes it sound like ironic.
Look, I'm sorry that you're so racist. Victor, why are you so racist?
Well, it all goes back. No, I'm kidding.
Well, it's all that Christian music we listened to as kids. You know, ironic versions of, you know, classic anti-slavery songs just makes it like, yeah, anti-slavery songs are dumb and ironic.
Yeah, it's crazy that on this particular album, Greg likes the ironic cover and we don't.
Right?
I don't think I don't think it's an ironic cover. I think it is so sincere. We're just like, we're just going to take the song, we're going to rock it up. Yeah, I don't think there's any sense of irony
So
here.
again, another example of like this same idea, like just needing refinement, is Flatfoot 56, the Christian version of Flogging Molly or Dropkick Murphys, take your pick. I saw them live once, and one of their iconic, like their show closing song is they do a Celtic punk cover of Why Am I Spacing on It, the classic hymn that's always played on bagpipes. Shoot. Amazing Grace. It's Amazing Grace.
That one?
Yeah. Yeah, they do a pop punk cover of Amazing Grace on bagpipes. And like,
okay.
It's kind of silly and cheesy, but it's also like, it's delivered in such a way that doesn't sound overwrought and ridiculous the way this one does.
It might just be because you don't listen to much hair metal, but Poison, CC DeVille became a born-again Christian, and so he does Amazing Grace as part of his guitar solo. So maybe I'm just more immune to hair metal covers of, old hymns. But for me, I rank generally based upon the songwriting and not based upon the execution. So I do think Stryper wrote songs better than Battle Hymn of the Republic on the same album. So Battle Hymn of the Republic, Stone Cold Classic. Waiting for a Love That's Real, more of a Stone Cold Classic. But yeah, I, not being racist, ranked it right in the middle because, look, I think that slavery is bad.
I think that this was like a good time and an amusing closer, but it is overwrought, but it's honestly not like over the top enough for me to be like enthusiastic about it. But I didn't hate it.
I mean, yeah, the thing to, consider is like, as you've we're all people who have experienced a post-Dragon Force world. And so, this looks like chump change in comparison, but I think at the time, this would be one of the most over-the-top things you've ever heard, and just this is so freaking metal. But, we've experienced Through the Fire and the Flames. So this is that's just like a soft rock cover in comparison.
This wouldn't even be in the back half of a Guitar Hero campaign.
But what I'd say, I think Michael Sweet is one of the best vocalists in rock, and still has it today. If you listen to current Stryper, he has it, and he killed it live after we opened for him. We got him pumped, then he did great because of us.
Thanks to you guys.
But he considers himself a guitar player first and a singer second, but he is absolutely a great vocalist. Knocks it out of the park on this track. And I do like what they do with the arrangement, the way it builds and crescendos to that ending. I like what they do musically. So I think it's solid. I give it a thumbs up.
I'm looking up Flatfoot 56 set lists, and I found a website that's showing their set list, and it looks like they're closing with I'll Fly Away these days. Also, their tours are Chicago to Minneapolis, St. Paul to Cleveland. That's it.
Oh.
Which, I mean, a Christian Celtic punk band, that really sounds like about the right tour range, is just a couple of the major cities in the Midwest. If they wanted to tour really hard, they do a bunch of, Rockville and Madison and Des Moines, but if they're only going to do a couple dates, yeah, Cleveland, Minneapolis, and Chicago are the dates they should play.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, to completely derail this into talking about Irishy things, I was surprised at how not a big deal St. Patrick's Day is in Nashville in comparison to Cleveland, where, like, Cleveland, like, the city just shuts down. Like, you just cannot drive anywhere. The entire downtown is just like, every bar is open and packed with live music, and it is this giant celebratory thing. And Nashville, it's just like the same amount of drunken assholes. Like, it's like, you didn't even change anything.
Same amount of drunken assholes, but it's harder to get into the Irish pub.
Right. Versus...
That's the day you go for Mexican.
Right. But versus, like, in Cleveland, like, it is maybe, like, the... no, it is the biggest holiday of the year in Cleveland, because...
They dye the Great Lake green for it.
Yeah, well, because they live in Cleveland, so, like, alcohol, this is the only thing we have.
Green.
They sing Cuyahoga, but with an Irish accent.
They just add bagpipes. But yeah, even as a guy who doesn't drink, St. Patrick's Day in Cleveland is just a ton of fun. But yeah, any other comments on Battle Hymn of the Republic before we move on?
Sorry for being racist.
I regret nothing. Victor, I think we outvote Greg. Greg is the one who likes the ironic cover of the anti-racism
It's not
song.
ironic.
Is in fact the racist.
It's not ironic.
I think we outvote you 2-1.
Yeah.
Next song.
Great transition. All right, so next up on the list, we have Together as One, which I ranked last place on the album.
Oh.
Victor, you're the one who mostly pulled this one up. This is exactly where I put it.
Interesting. See, one thing, this is a classic, well, maybe it's not classic, but this is an extremely first album blunder, is naming two songs with the same opening word.
Oh, yeah.
So I have to remember which one is which.
Yeah, it's like having, multiple songs with rock on your albums.
Yeah.
You're like doing that 2 albums in a row, having 6 songs with the word rock in the title, or 3 songs on your second album with the word stop in the title. And 2 of them starting with the word stop.
And one of them stopping with the word stop.
A minute, baby.
Nobody laughed at my joke, so.
I was too busy trying to remember the lyric. I'm still practicing. I haven't been in this band for very long.
That's right.
It's been about an hour.
It's been like 45 minutes, yeah.
Okay, so Together as One. I think on my second listen through, I appreciated this for the same reason I didn't appreciate Waiting for a Love That's Real, which is that it opens with a very different texture and is just a very different kind of song than most of this album.
Yeah.
And it's not like revolutionary or anything, but I think it's well mixed and generally well put together, and I enjoyed listening to it. And the more that I was jumping back and forth to make sure my rankings were in a completely sensible, uncontroversial order, this one kept jumping up because I was like, oh, this is like, it's a little bit different. It kind of adds an extra layer to the album that it didn't have. And I like these kind of, I don't know if Baroque is the term, but like kind of these chord progressions that keep going in sort of a downward harmonic direction while the lyrics lift up. That's a thing that works for me, even though like it's basic enough that I can kind of predict the next thing every time. It still works for me on a kind of a songwriting level. And I think in some tracks previous to this, based on my notes, the guitars, like the effect on them or maybe the mixing on them was making some of the like kind of the harmony parts a little bit grating on my ears, and it sounds like it was changed enough for this song that it sounded better to me. But that was over 24 hours ago that I wrote that, so who knows what that means.
No, I get what you're saying. There was a lot of guitar on this album that like sounded just like thin and shrill, and yeah, again, early band. They hadn't filed off all the burrs yet. They hadn't dialed in their guitar tone quite right.
Yep,
Yeah.
and also shout out to Michael Wagner, who produced this album. I have appeared on a couple different recordings that he has produced, of course uncredited because, Nashville life, hashtag Nashville life. But, obviously a legendary producer in his own right, has produced some amazing, amazing albums. So here's the thing. The way that Steve usually feels about ballads is the way I feel about most Stryper ballads until the early 90s, where I don't like most early Stryper ballads. I think they're very saccharine, like too cheesy, even for me, a little bit too wimpy, and just like how there's like that weird part of Christianity that makes you uncomfortable, like the guys who are just like super into it and you feel like you're not directly communicating with them and just they're not there and it's like talking to a lizard. That's how I feel about Stryper ballads until they did their secular album, which was not really a secular album because that's the one where they're just like, yeah, we're totally secular, but also we're going to save ourselves till marriage, not because of Jesus explicitly, but just because it's a good idea.
We've been doing it for 5 or 7 years now. Might as well stay with it.
But, that was the first time there's a ballad on there called Lady, which is just a ballad about a chick. And I'm like, oh, this one doesn't creep me out like your other ballads. And so, honestly, the ballads on this first album aren't as creepy as some other Stryper ballads that are about to come on the next couple albums. And so, this is fine, but I think it's sort of artificially deflated by just, like, me writing off this entire era of their ballad writing is creeping me out. So, it's fine, I guess, but I still ranked it at the bottom.
So, I ranked this one also pretty low, but whereas Greg was like, man, this was a little bit cheesy, I was like, this isn't cheesy enough. Because this song was just reminiscent enough of I'm Sailing Away, but didn't have any awesome lyrics about robots.
Actually, they were aliens, adjust glasses.
I don't care.
Yeah. I think I get where you're both coming from on this one, although I don't know about all of the creepiness because, as I say on every episode, I'm pretty lyrics deaf.
Right.
But
I'm looking up the lyrics, and the genius transcription of this is some wedding singer wrote down the lyrics as he sang them at a wedding, complete with ellipses every single line.
Wow.
It is a mess.
But this is I get the Styx comparison on this one, but there is a much more apt Styx comparison coming up.
Pressburg, get your shit together.
And I feel it is my duty to mention this as we're talking about Styx. Michael Sweet did end up becoming the lead singer of Boston for several years after Brad Delp died.
That's a good fit.
Yeah, and in terms of his vocal style, you can clearly tell he is influenced by Dennis DeYoung and Brad Delp, but just with more of a metal edge in terms of the vibrato and how powerful he's willing to push his voice. But you look at Brad Delp, Dennis DeYoung, you can clearly see how they led to the Michael Sweet style of singing.
Of Sweetener.
Yes. But yeah, so speaking of ballads that creep me out, next up on the list is First Love.
Yeah.
This is the one where I wrote in my notes, it's time to play America's favorite game show, God or My Girlfriend!
Yeah.
Trick question, it's both. This is about a girl who loves God.
Right, and how no man's ever going to compare to your first love, which is Jesus.
Yeah, so I put this one right in the middle, partially out of guilt in that until my mid-20s, this was how I wrote ballads, was I just I wrote a song about God and how much God loves this girl or how much I love God, and then just changed all the pronouns, all that South Park episode hit pretty close to home. So just sometime in my mid-20s, I stopped writing ballads. I only write ironic love songs now, and it works much better, and I feel much more artistically fulfilled and much less embarrassed. So this one's in the middle.
I don't know if I can honestly explain my my placement on this one because I don't remember it at all. My notes say feels maybe a little bit hair ballad 101. At least attempts some level of metaphor, which sort of inherently doesn't work on Christian albums, but I appreciate the effort.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I don't know, something about like the mental, like the mindset that the singer of these songs is in, just for some reason like disturbs me on a fundamental level that I can't explain. And the thing is, Michael Sweet is a nice guy. But just something about these songs just like gives me the willies, the jeepers creepers. I don't know what it is.
Are you just like disappointed that you'll never live up to God?
You know, none of us will, Steve.
Your girlfriend will never love you as much as she loves God.
I mean, yes.
Although in your case, I don't know.
No, but yes.
I mean, like, feel like your wife's faith is not really a explicitly theistic one. Certainly not a monotheistic one.
But it's very, look, she likes God, however defined, more than me.
Plus, like, God is hot.
Right?
This is known.
Jesus.
Yeah, otherwise,
Jesus was
why
ripped.
would people dress as sexy angels? But I think this, honestly, it's, for the concept that they're going for, it's actually very well executed. But I think that ultimately, early Stryper ballads didn't have as strong of melodies as some of their later material. And I think that these ballads on this album don't have enough dynamic contrast to necessarily really keep them interesting for the length that they are. And I think it just sort of hurts it overall in terms of arrangement. But, I mean, it's fine. It's just, I wouldn't say it's a classic of the band's catalog or a classic of hair band ballads in general.
It doesn't deserve to be almost 6 minutes long.
Right.
So maybe part of the explanation why it climbed so high on mine is because I liked the first minute and a half in my last listen through where I was just skimming through and I was like, oh, I like this. And then I didn't listen to the rest of the song and maybe it would have fallen if I had done my normal like 4 or 5 listens throughout the week instead of 2.5 crammed into like 2 evenings.
As I'm re-reviewing the lyrics right now, I'm like, oh shoot, these are actually a little bit slut-shamey too, aren't they? That's always rough.
Yeah, it's just like lyrically this one's a bit awkward, but also
maybe you shouldn't have loved dudes and you should have kept on loving Jesus, girl.
I mean,
again, I have written songs just like that and
probably around the same age.
I stopped writing songs explicitly like this by about, I think the last one I put out was around 20.
Okay.
A couple years before Stryper did.
But if you had like a major record deal and we're like, hey, we need you to write some songs.
Look, if
about
To Slay
Jesus.
Zombie Newton had gotten signed on the strength of Mita Ford, yes, I would have done this for days.
So,
and that was an esoteric ass reference. Wait, I got a reference button.
Man, this brings back a lot of memories.
Keep them to yourself, Pops.
I feel personally attacked by Bender right now.
well, hey, any other comments on First Love before we move on?
No.
All right, I'm done talking about this crappy song.
Yeah, I'm not going to fight that one that hard. But hey, next up on the list is a stone cold classic, a staple of the Stryper live show. It was on that greatest hits CD that I bought from the band, so one of the first songs of theirs I was introduced to. I think it's really great. The rest of you guys disagree with me, but we've got Reach Out next on the list.
I mean,
Fine,
Greg, we probably disagree in the same way that we fundamentally disagree on how these songs should be ranked most of the time. And that I said, like, this is a pretty decent song. It's just pretty overperformed here. It's one of those burrs that they didn't file off by the time this album got around, but it's decently written, which is why Greg ranks it high. And it's not as well arranged, which is why I ranked it in the middle. Also, it gets very CCM towards the end, which they sort of were a precursor to that, so that makes sense. But they like the down chorus and like major keys and build-ups, and it's got a lot of components that a lot of people went on to use very heavily over the next couple decades and ruined Christian music.
Right, but you can hardly blame them for like influence in all those bands.
I can't, but it makes listening to it years later like, oh, that's where that came from.
Now, see, I'm going to completely disagree with you about the arrangement because I think this is a song that has really great momentum throughout. So, like the way that, the rhythm of the drums and guitars shift between different sections of the song allows for the melody to really stick out in each section. And so it makes the verses catchier, the choruses catchier and more anthemic. And I think this is one of the ones where, like, it doesn't get lost in the production, for me personally, because I think just, like, the hooks are so well arranged throughout. I like that down chorus, and I do like, Stryper is a very unique hair metal band with how often they're utilizing major keys.
It's true.
And, like, this does feel like a CCM song done by a hair metal band. And the thing is, that's kind of a thing that Stryper has done a bunch of times, is that they're like this weird meeting place between CCM and hair metal, but that makes them ultimately very unique because CCM bands don't sound like this, and hair metal bands don't sound like this. It's something that made Stryper uniquely Stryper, and it's a song that, like, makes you feel uplifted, makes you feel like if this was at your church, you'd be like, yeah, I'm pumped, and I'm gonna sing Reach Out and sing along. Like, it makes you feel good, lifts your spirits. Obviously, I've known the song longer. I've known it as a concert staple. I've seen it live. I've enjoyed it live. But even when I first heard it on that Greatest Hits CD, it was a standout cut. And it's still a standout cut today where, like, I think it's an absolute masterpiece. One of the best songs on the album. I think it's really, really great.
Just for the people at home who don't know, the acronym CCM stands for Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Which, of course, is a reference to the band Christian Contemporary Rusick.
Yeah, that's right.
This isn't the first time we've said CCM on this show. I hope that anybody who was confused by that term in previous episodes just, ducked it.
Yeah.
Or, like, I don't know, if you're listening to this episode, we would hope that you have enough familiarity with Christian music that you know what CCM means. But, in fairness to the listener who might not know that, Stryper said their goal was to not be associated with Christian bands, but to be associated with bands of the genre. So they wanted to be associated with, hair metal bands and metal bands. And they thought that if they limited themselves to just like playing churches in the Christian market, that the message would not spread out to people who might need it more.
We've got the one fan who's listening who hasn't listened to anything with guitars since Petra in the late 80s. And they're so confused right now.
But yeah, Victor, go ahead. What are your thoughts on this?
Why do you
one?
hate this song?
I think this is the one where I specifically call out the guitar tone on the harmonies as being
a little overplayed.
A little like shrill is maybe the better word. And I think it does, like, to your guys' point, I wrote that it feels a little bit like a masqueraded worship song for me. And as I have mentioned on previous episodes, I am pretty averse to that kind of thing now, just because I played in so many worship bands in high school. I'm pretty
I don't even
sick
think
of
they're
it.
masquerading this as a worship song. This is just a worship song done by a hair metal band. There's no masquerading here.
Well, it's a little bit masqueraded because most worship songs don't open with like 4-part harmony or whatever. But
that's because most worship bands aren't that good.
Yeah, like a good worship band, I'm sure Maranatha was doing that by then. They've been around for 14 years.
But I specifically cite here that I like most of the things after the drum break and the harmonies after that as well. But I don't.
This album was competing with Praise 7, The Lord Reigns.
But yeah, no, I think personally that drum break is great because it's both, a hair metal sing-along chorus and a praise chorus. I think that is actually very cool. But yeah, the harmonies and the builds they do after that drum break is very cool and a bit more theatrical than a praise band would do.
Greg, for like the last 20 seconds, you have been a youth pastor. Just like flat out be like, I think it's like both a hair metal sing-along and a praise chorus. It's very cool. Let me turn around my chair backwards and rap with you kids a bit.
I mean,
you know who also is very cool?
Jesus.
Damn it. Stepping on my lines.
Like, look, I acknowledge that, like, there's so much when, like, you're trying to describe why Stryper is cool, you will sound like a youth pastor. They're like, what if Iron Maiden sang about Jesus?
Greg is writing for Campus Life now.
But look, this is Stone Cold classic. I think Jesus would like this song.
I'm sure Jesus does like the song. I'm sure Jesus probably approves of a lot of what Stryper has done with their career and their ministry. It's just I'm a very snarky person and I have trouble taking it seriously.
I think I'm willing to admit that maybe this one suffered a little bit from my last listening of only the first minute and a half of each song.
Oh yeah, this song definitely picks up halfway through. My description of it really divides into two parts of the, this is decently catchy and overperformed, describing the first part, and then it gets very CCM and has some interesting changes and a cool build at the end. Only the first half is really kind of like, I'm not super into, but halfway through, it really redeems itself. Or rather, halfway through, Jesus redeems it.
I think the first half is great. I think the drums have a lot of swagger on this track, and I think that's very cool.
Is there a lot of dick swinging on this track?
Let's see if we can get that one. Where is it?
And it's about Paul Stanley's dick. How this girl's gonna get some of his dick.
Reaching out for that dick.
Michael Sweets.
Jesus' dick. Turns out this is a Catholic song.
Look, I'm just saying that Jesus was crucified, and he almost certainly was crucified naked. So more people than you think saw Jesus' dick.
This is my body, and take this in remembrance of me.
Wow. Oh, well.
The apostle John definitely saw Jesus' dick.
Should we stress how, into Jesus you are as we continue making jokes?
Yes, Jesus is pretty great. Again, I came here right from church. Granted, it's the middle of December, so church super sucks right now because every week is just like a different age of children doing their Christmas whatever, and they're all bad. This one was called Straight Outta Bethlehem.
Oh,
it was written by white. It was written by white people in downtown Nashville.
Man, remember when all those Straight Outta t-shirts came out and they started to not be about locations?
Straight out of patience for this bullshit.
Right? Awful. Absolutely awful.
He's dropped one of the virtues up in this piece.
All right, but Reach Out, Stryper classic, ranked way too low. But you know what? This is what happens when you get a couple non-fans on these episodes.
Yeah.
But I think it's a healthy perspective to have because me as a fan of the band, love it. But for non-fans, I guess it doesn't work.
All right, I'm done talking about this great song.
That's right, it's great. Next up on the list, one of the most hilarious song titles in the Stryper catalog. The Rock That Makes Me Roll.
Yes. Yes.
So right in the middle.
Oh, wow. I just realized that other than the first two and last two, I exactly predicted this entire ranking.
Wow.
Yeah, so The Rock That Makes Me Roll, on one of the great Stryper song titles, on par with Rock the Hell Out of You. Jesus is the rock that makes me roll. What more can you say? It's it's honestly not that great melodically in comparison to a lot of other stuff on the album. I think Reach Out is a much better written song, but this rocks more. This is not a praise song. This is just a rock song that happens to be about Jesus.
You don't put the word rock in the song title if it's not going to be like the heavy rock song.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't know, it's fine, but I think it's one of the weaker songs on the album overall, so why don't you guys go?
I would actually agree that it's not the greatest song, but the premise is so good. It's like it's such a Christian joke that I can't help but appreciate it.
When did Def Leppard's Rock of Ages come out?
I believe after this.
Ooh.
Got him good.
Nice.
But like it's so.
Actually, wait, it might have been before. I'm trying to remember. What year is this? 85?
85.
I think Rock of Ages might have been
83.
83.
Wow.
So really, Stryper is just ripping off Def Leppard here, picking up a hymnal in the studio and just singing whatever they see.
Either way, this is still funny, and that gets a lot of points from me. And I thought the guitar coda was cool. Plus, any song that kind of ends its vocal section with the lead singer jumping an octave and a half to hit the final note, I'm into.
Honestly, I put this one right in the middle. I put it right where we ranked it. And it comes down to arrangement. It's the heavy guitars just didn't seem to really fit what was going on with the melody, and the positive vocals don't really fit the metal vibe super well in my mind. I thought that like an alt rock version of this song would actually be pretty great. Like,
Says the guy who likes alt rock.
Right? No, yeah, but like a more.
If it was the genre that I like, it'd be better.
Yes. But I think it would be a better realization of the song as written. You know how that sometimes is. Like, there are songs that just work better when they're covered later. Like Johnny Cash's version of Hurt is just better than the original. And I think this is one that if somebody had done a more subdued alt-rock cover in the 90s, it probably would have just been a better version of the same song. One of those ones where like,
but it would rock less, therefore defeating the purpose of the song.
Yeah, Johnny Cash rocks less than Trent Reznor too, but that doesn't mean that he did.
But Hurt didn't have rock in the title. It wasn't called Rock Hurt. It was just called Hurt. This is the rock that makes me roll, and you want to make it rock less?
I mean, it was about rocks. Heyo. Drug reference. Wait, I got a drugs drop somewhere here, right?
Probably.
Oh, I can't find it. Where are my drugs? Where are my drugs?
He produces many a wine out of nowhere spell, and is drunk every day before noon.
I mean,
that describes Michael Sweet.
Right, totally. I mean, it's fine. It's a competent Stryper song, but I think the weirdness you're describing about just like how the metal vibe versus like how major key it is, like clashing.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Stryper sound. Like, that's just like, that's what they do. So eventually you get used to it, and I think they get better at refining that, but like, that's their thing. Like, that is what made Stryper a unique hair metal band. Like, that's just what they do. And I think it does ultimately allow them to stand out beyond just the Jesus thing. Like, there's actual sonic differences between them and other bands.
You got Jesus. What else you got? Major keys! Yeah!
But yeah, any other comments on the rock that makes me roll before we move on?
I will let you down. I will let you roll.
Yeah!
Alright, so next up on the list we have a song that has the same title as a really good Cheap Trick song. We have Surrender, next on the list.
Oh, and a really good U2 song.
Yeah, so
it's almost as if the song is a single word title, and it's really easy for people to write a lot of songs with single word titles.
So here's the issue. I know that Stryper, based upon their influences, had to be Cheap Trick fans. That is, I would not write a song called Surrender because, like, the Cheap Trick Surrender exists. This song is good. It's actually considered a staple of the Stryper live set, so I've heard the song live. It's considered one of their classic songs off this album. I think it's good, not as good as other songs, and once again, I'm always going to compare it to a much better Cheap Trick song. The U2 song is fine.
You complain when I do that, Greg.
I mean, yeah. What is Christianity if not hypocrisy?
Hot takes.
My head! My precious head!
But I think, it's what I would say is there's a difference between the same song title with bands that like have no connection versus like you look at Stryper's influences. Clearly, Cheap Trick is within those influences in terms of time frame, similar bands that they like. They were aware of the song.
What is Christianity but desperately flailing about to try to make the text match your preconceived notions?
Yeah.
Yes, science, bitch.
Why do I have the yes science bitch drop into the hot take category?
I don't know.
Yeah, faith, bitch.
But once again, it's still a good song, but I don't think it's as much of a classic as many other songs in their catalog. This is one of the ones where I'm like, it makes the live show. I'm like, I can see why, but I think you'd have better options.
I was a little tired of the album by this point, so my notes just consist of, that's a pretty cool vocal effect.
This one has a really great opening section that reminds me of a Metallica song that I can't remember what it's called, but it's probably one of the 3 kinds of songs that they write. And the solo in this one does stand above the other ones on this album. Like, this one is really great. And I think this song is good all the way through. And I also thought that the first minute and a half was really good. So that's why it's my number 1.
That's fair. I think there's, once again, I think great guitar work across this entire album. I would not say this is my favorite solo on the album. That's actually the song that's next in the ranking.
Okay.
But I think it's a very good song. I wonder if I would have not ranked it as low if it didn't share the title with one of the best Cheap Trick songs, which is therefore one of the best songs ever.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, we're gonna call this song Yesterday. Like, good luck to you.
Surrender to Yesterday.
See how it stacks up. It's a good song. It's just not Cheap Trick good.
Greg, quick question.
Yes.
Have you listened to, or at least looked at the track list of my debut album, Larva?
I remember listening to it, but I think I was just streaming it and I wasn't looking at the song titles because I was working.
Okay. Because I named a song Hey Jude.
Good choice.
Yeah,
I bet it's better than the original Hey Jude.
For reasons.
Steve, no. Victor, I'm sorry, I love you. And I get that you're doing that as like an intentional joke. Like, Stryper isn't joking naming a song Surrender. Like,
no, of course not.
Right.
I just think, yeah.
But there's a difference
between
between doing that.
There is a reason to do it, but it's like, I was definitely making a joke.
Right.
And I could see this not being one.
This is, no, there's,
or not even really a reference. Like, surrender is such a, like, Christian music word 101.
Surrender to Jesus.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Hey Jude, 2 minutes and 40 seconds long. Guarantee it's better than the original.
No, it's look, I like Victor a
Hey
lot.
Jude is too long. Hot takes.
Look, Daddy, Todd is stupid, and I'm with him.
Yeah, that was the best response to that.
The irony being that I hit the wrong button.
Well, there we go. Steve is stupid. All right, so
I'm with him.
Next up on the list, we have the song that I ranked number 1 on the album. We've got Soldiers Under Command next on the list.
Who's making the joke? Greg, I think you're the only one who hasn't in the text conversation, so I think you should make the joke.
I don't feel like it because I think it's a really great song.
Victor, you want to do the honors?
I don't know. Is it better if I have inadvertently stolen it from you, or?
I don't think you actually stole it. I think it's an obvious enough joke that we both came up with it independently.
More like suck?
Yet another joke about death, perplexing some, and just plain scaring most of.
Yeah, so for those at home who don't know what's going on, soldiers under command, SUC, suck. That's the joke. Haha. Jokes are funny if you explain them.
That's the entirety of the joke, and we took like 3 minutes to get to it.
Right.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, science, bitch.
Yeah.
I'm insane with anger.
Thanks, RNG, for backing me up on that one.
So for me, this is a clear number one. I think it is the best written song, the best performed song. Like this is considered a classic in both the Stryper catalog and just like in hair metal in general. This is considered like one of the classics of the genre. Like classic riff, great vocal melodies throughout, like extremely catchy. In my opinion, the best solo on the album, just like great movement. The song like never really slows down. It keeps your interest throughout. It's a great opener. Michael Sweet played it live after we opened for him. And, once again, because he was feeling that great energy from us, did a great job with it. But it's like, this is like, it's a stone cold classic. It's just, it works on every level except lyrically. It's like, oh, soldiers under command, crusades. Fighting the Lord's battle plan. You know what? I get it. You're just like, we're fighting for Jesus to combat sin, and just like not even thinking about the Crusades in the back of your mind.
I think it's a reference to Timothy, actually. At least that's what Wikipedia says. 2 Timothy chapter 2.
Let's read that right now.
Yeah, let's read that right now. What's it say, Steve?
Verses 3 through 4. Let's see, quoting from the NIV. Join with me in suffering like a good soldier of Jesus Christ. No one serving as a soldier gets entangled in civilian affairs, but rather tries to please his commanding officer.
Which is Jesus.
Right. Yeah, so this was an epistle written by Paul to Timothy, who is, basically his protege, and took over the church in, I want to say Corinth, but I don't remember for sure. I might be wrong on that one. But yeah, this is the second letter that he wrote to Timothy, and yeah, basically telling him to persevere in his faith and his trying to understand the gospel and the scripture, and to not get distracted by all of the things of the world, presumably some of the shenanigans of running a church in one of the most intense cities in the Roman Empire.
And, as that message seems appropriate for Stryper, don't get distracted by the world as they're, dealing with the Sunset Strip hedonism, and guys, we're going to sing about Jesus instead.
Right. So Paul wrote a lot of his epistles while he was in prison, so he uses a lot of soldier metaphors, presumably because he's just sitting around like, what do I see right now? Oh, yeah, there's the dude with the sword making sure I don't leave this building. Hey, Roman dude with a sword. Nice shirt. I'm going to write about it.
Nice Stryper shirt, dude.
Right, nice Stryper shirt, bro.
Put on the full armor of Stryper. Yeah, did Stryper ever do an Armor of God clothing set? The beanie and the t-shirt and a belt and
I don't
and
know.
a ring that increases your vitality
and a Bible in a holster.
I don't know about the Bible in the holster. I'd have to check on that.
And some sweet kicks.
Some Michael Sweet kicks.
Ooh, hey! I'm sure the shoes are yellow and black. Anyway, one thing I also want to stress is how well all of the band members are doing on this track. Michael Sweet, great vocalist, but him and Oz Fox are an incredible guitar duo on this track. Robert Sweet just killing on the drums, and Timothy Gaines, he is there on the bass.
He showed up.
Harsh,
you could say.
But, in fairness, this is a difficult song to play. There's a lot of changes, a lot of movements, but it nothing feels out of place. Any switch to a new section makes musical sense. So, yeah, just all around home run, standout classic. So Victor, you ranked it right in the middle.
Yeah, I don't think it's because I didn't like it. I think it's more just because, like, I thought it was a really solid opener. I bet if I had just listened to the album once, this would have been, like, in my top 3. But then kind of in my more skimming time, I was kind of like, I think the opening of this is good, but the opening of Surrender is way better. And the chorus is a little, like, I think they play it well, but from, like, a melodic and, like, construction standpoint, it's a little kind of, like, it's complex, but in a way that is not as accessible to me in a way that I could appreciate. And I think it's good. It's just not, like, it feels a little bit like it at least set the tempo for what I was going to get on this album, which I can appreciate because that was honestly better than I was expecting. And the solos are good. I do note that here in my notes, but I think I just got a little tired of that intro.
Man, that intro, I think the intro, like, has the best riffs on the album for me in terms of, like, guitar parts. This is number 1 easily. And then in terms of hooks, also number 1. So just, that's why I ranked it number 1. Steve, you ranked it.
I ranked it number 3, exactly where it landed.
Yeah.
So for me, the top 3 songs are all just, like, very near misses of, like, sort of platonically correct new wave of British heavy metal about Jesus. And this one, its miss is that the vocals just aren't quite there. Like, Michael Sweet's vocals throughout basically the rest of the album are much more on point, but this one is just a little bit... I'm wondering if this might have been, like, the first song that they actually recorded, so he hadn't really gotten into the groove of recording in the studio, but they're just a little bit unrefined. And if they tightened up those vocals a little bit, I think this would have been much better recording of this song.
And so I'm the thing is, I think it's a great vocal performance, and I'm not understanding what you're saying by unrefined. Like, what are you saying by that? Because I don't understand.
I'm trying to remember, because it's been a while since I listened to this song exactly one time. But I feel like...
Because he's got, from what I hear from it, he's got range, power, tonality. There's a strong melody. There's a good balance of, like, switching up the dynamics between different parts. There's great harmonies layered on top of it, and it also has, like, the falsetto metal wails in the appropriate spots.
I don't remember any falsetto metal wails in this one.
Yeah, they're there.
This one for sure has one.
Yes. So it might be that
maybe that's it. Is like we got to that, and it just wasn't as on the ball as the other falsetto metal wails in this album are.
I think it might also be possible that you just got used to his vocal style as you continued through the album.
No, because on the very second song, I was like, okay, yes, these vocals are much better on point.
Yeah, I don't know, because I mean, I don't hear that. What's your thought on that, Victor?
I don't have anything about that. I think his vocals, for the most part on this album, are really good throughout. I realized looking through my notes here, another thing that did bring this song down was, as lyrics deaf as I am, I don't like a war metaphor, especially, like, in the context of Christianity. So that's probably another reason that it fell quite a bit.
Cribbed directly from Paul, huh?
Yeah. That guy was a hack.
Although the two-edged sword, that's from Revelation.
One of my top 3 Audioslave albums.
I mean, the war metaphor has always been something that sort of stuck in my craw about this song, where it's always separated me a bit from it a little, but it's just so bitchin' and awesome and makes you raise those devil horns and then you move your hands to make a cross instead. I don't know. It's
angel wings.
Angel wings. I mean, this is a classic of hair metal. This is one of the, like, if you were to make a list of the top 100 hair metal songs, this would be on the list. It is a stone cold classic, and it was very fun to do a show and then hear the song live, like an hour or so later is just fun. But that's really cool.
If I were to do a list of the top 100 hair metal songs, the list would probably end after about a dozen, as I'd run out of hair metal songs to name, and there would be a surprising amount of the Killer Dwarves on the list.
Well, you're, Canadian, so it makes sense. But a surprising lack of Honeymoon Suite on your list, though.
It's true. Look, I just started listening to Killer Dwarves because I was super into D&D.
I mean, yeah.
And my dad wasn't punk enough to have any The Dwarves albums sitting around.
Well, yeah.
Probably because a woman wearing nothing but a ski mask is the sort of thing he would not have left an album of that where his kids could see it.
Fair enough. Well, hey, we're at the number 2 song on the ranking. Next up on the list, we have Together Forever. So this definitely shocked me with how high it ranked overall with the panel. But also, this is very much the epitome of what Stryper does, where they're like, we're a metal band with metal guitar drums.
Doo-wop break!
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who do they think they are? Us on Girl Dressed as Sailor Moon?
Heyo. I mean, they probably don't, because I was born slightly before this album came out. What month did this come out in? May. No, I was born several months after this album, and you were born 5 years later.
Yeah, so
I don't think they were looking at us as an influence. Unless they have a time machine, or unless we have a time machine, which we sing about all the time. Hold on, let me get my my ribbon and my pins and a board.
Yeah, so Stryper is a band that admittedly has a bunch of different musical influences, and this is them like incorporating doo-wop and more major keyisms, rocking a little bit less, and just giving you that good, that feel-good Christianity. Lift your spirits. But it's a very catchy chorus, very catchy hooks throughout. It's about like, hey, we're all in this together as long as we're all Christians.
All 4,400 of us are in this together, or however many it is.
144,000.
Yeah, whatever it is. 4,400, I guess, would be pretty low.
So wait, are you hypothesizing that Strypers are specifically Jehovah's Witnesses?
I am hypothesizing.
Although the Jesus Lover of My Soul is a Wesleyan thing.
Well,
they're Wesleyan Jehovah's Witnesses. We are getting deep into the reeds.
Well, wait, there's that Stryper song about how when you die, you get a planet.
Now, is that one of the creepy ballads or one of the good ones?
Oh, no, it's a rocker.
Girl, come on, join my harem on my own planet.
There's gold
I say
tablets.
girl very literally because you're 12. It's okay.
Michael Sweet is a gentleman and a very nice guy and treated us with a lot of respect. And a really talented musician.
So you're saying he's not a polygamist?
He is happily married to one woman.
All right.
Whose wife actually we met at Rockin' Pod and was also very nice to us.
Wait, did you say he's married to one woman whose wife we met at Rockin' Pod?
No.
Michael Stanley's wife's wife? Sorry, Michael Sweet's wife's wife.
Yeah, no, Michael Stanley's the guy from Cleveland that no one has ever heard of unless you're friends with me or from Cleveland. Which, by the way, I heard a Michael Stanley song in the grocery store in Nashville and I was so confused.
Weird.
I thought, like, am I in Cleveland? Like, was the last 6 years but a dream?
Do you, like, if you're, like, in a grocery store and you hear Michael Stanley, do you just immediately hit the ground so that you're not shot at, or
yeah, pretty much.
What's your reflex there? Shit, I'm in Cleveland. Hit the
dirt.
Right. Cleveland time machine. Cleveland time machine.
All I want in Cleveland is a time machine. Honestly, all I want in Cleveland is just a car.
All I want in Cleveland is a way out of
to
Cleveland.
go anywhere but Cleveland. That's not true. Anywhere but Ohio.
Right.
Because if you just leave Cleveland, you might end up,
in Columbus.
Right.
So, Together Forever. It's a good, uplifting song. Steve, you ranked it as number 1.
I did. I think, talking about the near misses from Platonic new wave of British heavy metal, the only parts of it that are near misses are really that it's, it's kind of saccharine. The doo-wop thing, I guess, is more hair metal, where you're just doing something real cheesy. But like, it's pretty. It's much closer than the other ones. Really, I just want to be listening to an Iron Maiden album. Is the trick.
Well, see, this is like Iron Maiden, but more appropriate because they love Jesus.
Right? Which, fine.
This is what your youth pastor would be like. Don't listen to Iron Maiden. Listen to Stryper.
Look,
instead.
Iron Maiden writes songs about making your peace with God when you're about to be executed. That's pretty Christian. Heck, that's like half the New Testament.
Number of the Beast is an evil song.
The Number of the Beast is a biblical reference.
But it's evil.
Is it? How do they approach the topic?
I mean, I'm just being a reductionist youth pastor.
It's true.
I mean, also, Stryper does have a song and album called To Hell with the Devil. So
wait, what's the Iron Maiden song actually called?
Number of the Beast.
Huh. Oh, it's because I spelled it with an L. Number of the Beast.
But I think that, would you so you're hearing this as the band's first album. Would you assume that the band probably got better with what they were going for as they continued?
Oh yeah, of course. Obviously, everybody tends to like refine their sound at least a little bit.
So do you see potential based upon this first album and this song where you're like, yeah, this is almost there, but not quite for you personally?
Yeah.
So would this song and album be like, yeah, I'd be willing to check out more Stryper?
Yeah, probably.
So Victor, what were your thoughts on this one?
I think I mostly had like mixing issues with it, and maybe I wasn't as into the lyrics because the 2 tracks preceding it are so like specific lyrically. Doing some like Soldiers Under Command is so like about its metaphor, and then the other one we haven't brought up yet is so Styx, and and this one I think just didn't stand out the way that those other 2 tracks do, and so it just didn't click with me the same way. But like other than that, like I think this one's solid.
Number of the Beast is about calling the cops on the Antichrist. How could any Christian be upset at that song?
They were.
They not read the lyrics?
Yes, because they're Christians, Steve. Do you think Christians actually read and pay attention to the text?
They're just calling the cops on Iron Maiden, calling the cops on the Antichrist.
Right?
Who's the Antichrist calling the cops on? It's the cops. Dun dun dun.
Dun dun dun.
Twist ending.
8675309, the number of the beast. Anybody ever do that? Is that funny?
Made Steve laugh.
I'm just picturing, Jenny trying to arrest the Antichrist.
Yeah.
This is not what I scrawled my number on a bathroom wall for. Also, Jenny definitely scrawled her own number on the bathroom wall.
No.
Some douchebag did that.
So, hey, we're at the number 1 song on the album, so let's go through the ranking from the bottom to the top. Waiting for a Love That's Real. Battle Hymn of the Republic. Together as One. First Love. Reach Out. The Rock That Makes Me Roll. Surrender. Soldiers Under Command. Together Forever. But the best song on Soldiers Under Command, according to this panel of experts and me, Makes Me Wanna Sing.
I accidentally transcribed this as Makes Me Wanna Swing. And so I was prepping for all the hilarious jokes I was going to tell, but like, oh yeah, what kind of swinging are you guys doing? Then I just realized it was a typo. And that like a song about singing about Jesus is very on brand for a Christian band in the 80s.
So I've been very positive and, singing the praises of Stryper, pun intended, on this episode. This is one of the Stryper songs that consistently makes me laugh out loud.
Oh, yes. That's why it got so many points from me.
And it's why it got so many points from me. That very loud chorus of Jesus. Those Styx-esque harmonies. And just talk about how he's the King of Kings.
It's so good.
Like, as we're talking about, Christian music and glam. It's about like doing something silly, kind of knowing it's silly, but still doing it. That's what they do here.
Tonight's the night.
It's just like when I first heard it on the Greatest Hits CD, burst out laughing, and then immediately listened to it again. Would just like play it for friends unexpectedly, and like when they're just listening to it, it just sounds like a normal rock song until you get to that chorus, and that is way loud in the mix. You know this is about Jesus, and this is a very short song. It's under 3 minutes. It is speedy. You know, it's a fast rocker, but that chorus, just, you know,
I think I rank this one second just because the guitar tone was a little thin.
Ah, man.
Otherwise, yeah, this would be top.
This one,
Steve, did you laugh during the chorus?
I didn't, but I was also at work. I think laughing out loud at Stryper at my office would be frowned upon. Like, what do you mean you're laughing at Christian music? Not with Christian music. That's it. We're putting on the weird, ironic, way too drum heavy cover of Little Drummer Boy by for King and Country on repeat. I watched that this weekend. I don't think that band has any sense of irony. They're like, yeah, we're going to sing about Jesus, but also we're going to name ourselves after British imperialist policies. We're going to cover Little Drummer Boy, and we're just going to have a huge band of 12 people and loud drums everywhere, much like the Little Drummer Boy would have done for our Lord and Savior.
Pum-pum-pum.
Here's a gong to lull baby Jesus to sleep. Wait, I've got drum sounds to lull baby Jesus to sleep. Rock-a-bye, Jesus.
So yeah, it makes me want to sing. Staple of the live show on the Greatest Hits album. Considered a classic off this album. Maybe not considered one of the greatest hair metal songs of all time because it's...
You really can't scream Jesus that much.
Right. And, you know, it goes awkward on a playlist next to Cherry Pie.
Jesus is my cherry pie.
Man, like, there is just something inherently ridiculous about singing anyone's name, and then with the added layer of that name being Jesus... And then with the added layers and layers of various harmonies and various vocal takes they had to do to fill out just that extreme... it's so good! I love it so much. It's so funny. I almost convinced my coworker to play this while we were at work, and I would have like, suffocated laughing.
I mean,
at the liquor store, just listening to Jesus! It's like, oh man.
I mean, it is a great, like, when the person you're listening to it with doesn't expect it or doesn't know it. I can't stress, like, how many times I've been driving with someone and I've got, like, the CD in and I'll, like, make sure I put on that song first. They don't know the band.
Yeah.
Or even if they do know Stryper, they don't expect it to be that Jesus-ian.
So I'm trying to gauge, like, your levels of trolling with music in the car. Because I think when I was traveling with you and you're like, I'm going to put in a troll album to upset and confuse Steve, you jumped straight to Speedball Jam. So, like, what kind of person do you jump straight to, like, the lower level of, like, we're going to play a hair metal song about Jesus?
And that typically, like, a non-musician or someone who hasn't listened to anything that came out before they were born.
All right. So you're like, you should check out hair metal. It's actually pretty great. And then we were hanging out with musicians. It's Speedball Jam or the least wanted music.
Like, the thing is, I have to gauge, like, how much troll music has this person probably already listened to. And so, you know, for some people, just like the German version of Total Eclipse of the Heart is enough of a troll. Or my Japanese city pop is enough of a troll. But then, like, for you, like, when you were like, yeah, let's just listen to, like, this Weird Al polka medley I made. like I have to just like go all in, like fuck it, Speedball Jam. Like there's no room for like diplomacy.
I think it's worth clarifying, Greg, when you say Weird Al polka medley I made, you mean a medley of Weird Al polka medleys.
Yes.
In that I took all of the polka medleys when I got the box set and I stitched them together and then pulled out I Kissed a Girl because that song sucks. And I'm not even the first person to do this. I'm at least the third because I've seen multiple versions of this on the internet. It is the greatest song.
So what I'm saying is for you, that's
gotta pull out the big guns. That's fair.
That's why I jumped to Speedball Jam because like I know better. I know that if I just play City Pop, you're like, yeah, that's a good bass line. That's all that's gonna happen.
So here's what we need to do, Greg. We need to take your copy of Speedball Jam and we need to make the left channel be some fan fiction.
Oh, some Michael Stipe and Prig.
What's yes. The left channel will be My Immortal.
My god.
I don't know. That doesn't feature any members of Kiss. I feel like it should be Kiss M. Preg.
Well, no. What we'll do is we'll get My Immortal, and then we'll just like control replace,
change all the names.
Oh my god, that would be so good.
There you go.
Dumbledore burst into the room saying, "Peter, Chris, what are you fucking kids doing?" I approve this turn of events.
So while we're here, I'm gonna read the alternative ranking that would have happened if we used Nate's ranking.
Okay.
From the bottom to the top. Together is 1 at the bottom. Waiting for a Love That's Real. Battle Hymn of the Republic. First Love. Reach Out, which ranked about in the same spot. Then Together Forever, much lower. Then The Rock That Makes Me Roll. Makes Me Wanna Sing would be number 3 in the ranking. It wouldn't have won. Surrender would be number 2, and then Soldiers Under Command would have won in the end, if we use Nate's ranking.
Oh, wow, that is different.
Sorry, I was a little behind.
Yeah, it happens. But, listeners at home, you can decide what the canon ranking is.
I believe the one that we talked about for the most part is much closer to the canon ranking, in that the only ones that I was wrong on were I had the first 2 switched and the last 2 switched. Otherwise, spot on.
Yeah, so if you want to believe Steve's ranking is canon, then...
Which you do.
Then, yeah, then go with the one that we talked about most of the episode.
I mean, I wouldn't accept a ranking that makes me want to sing any lower than 3, so technically they're both fine.
Yeah, Nate did not like that one as much. That's 3rd from the bottom for him.
Ooh.
Wow.
But the rest of us rightly, rose it up where, revived it from death. Let it rise.
Redeemed it, if you will.
But yeah, so that is our ranking. So how did you guys feel about the ranking? Were you guys happy with it? Surprised by it?
Almost a perfect ranking.
I think I'm mostly satisfied. I don't know if I didn't even honestly have enough time to develop any connections to various songs aside from Makes Me Want to Sing and the opening of Surrender and The Rock That Makes Me Roll. So those ended up high enough for me, I suppose.
So yeah, and I was not surprised by the ranking with Nate, and then very surprised by the ranking with the 3 of us. Reach Out is the one that I'm most surprised with in general, just because in my mind it's like, yeah, this is a Stryper classic. And I'm like, oh, but it is very CCM, and I can see how guys burnt out on CCM would put it lower in the list.
I've heard some shit, kid.
Yeah.
I've played some shitty bass lines in my time. Do 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 do.
But yeah, I mean, overall solid ranking, and I think we did a pretty good job talking about the band's first full length. And so Victor, what's your walk away from Stryper with this in terms of respect for their abilities, and do you plan on maybe checking out any more of their music? And what's your general takeaway?
I really liked the guitar work on this album for the most part. Certainly the solos. Most of the riffs are good. I think there was a couple where I was kind of like, I don't know if these are meshing with the vocal melody, but that is like, for our first album stuff, it's pretty great. I don't know if I'm going to go out of my way to listen to more Stryper because it's not really my genre. But, I had a good time listening to it. I got up early Saturday morning to listen to it again.
You might play Makes Me Want to Sing a few more times and play it for friends.
Oh my god. That is entering a certain echelon of like... yeah, oh man. It's funny. It's so great. It's so Christian. But I think overall I liked this. I think if somehow there ends up being more Stryper episodes for this podcast, I would do them if you needed me. Now that I'm in the lipstick generation, I think we should cover Makes Me Want to Sing.
I approve of this. And so, Steve, what's your takeaway from this? Like, do you as a Christian, do you think that what Stryper is doing is, good for the faith? Do you respect what they're doing musically? Like, how do you overall feel about this band and what they have to offer?
I mean, I feel like it's one of those things where like their intentions are good and their execution is a little unrefined. I feel like they're them intentionally disassociating from the Christian music industry is actually a very positive thing to do. And I think one of the great weaknesses of Christian music, especially Christian rock and Christian
roll.
Right, yeah. Christian music that attempts to reach the mainstream is you get this weird insular thing where it's not allowed to explore the whole range of human emotion because everything has to fit in the Christian box. And that has, like, a lot of Christian artists have commented on this. And the Christian artists that have really had things that are valuable to say artistically and valuable to say in terms of witnessing outside of the faith and not just producing the same generic praise songs to be performed in churches every Sunday for the CCLI licensing fees. This sentence got really long and convoluted, much like the writings of Paul, and I forgot what I was saying. But, the best Christian music is the Christian music that breaks out of the box of Christian music. And I think Stryper, they sort of were precursors to that box really being what it has become in the last 15 or so years. And I think that's good. It's positive.
All right. Well, fair enough.
Hillsong is bad.
Hillsong, bad.
Yeah, no, just like Prosperity Gospel Church having a huge amount of control of the theology taught in English-speaking churches around the world is objectively a bad thing, and stop buying Hillsong licenses.
And I think, I don't remember exactly, but I do recall an interview where Michael Sweet was criticizing Prosperity Gospel.
It's bad.
Yeah.
It's a bad thing.
Yes.
And this Australian megachurch should stop influencing the global church.
And
Jerks.
They don't even sound like Styx.
Right? They sound like bad U2.
Yeah.
They don't even sound like Styx meets Iron Maiden.
I was at a church Christmas party a couple years back, and they just had a TV in the background playing a YouTube playlist of, I forget which church, but it was just some church's praise band with a bunch of people hanging out singing along, and there's just like a single shot where some random teenager in a Blue Lives Matter shirt came by and was like, what the hell? Was nobody at the door being like, you cannot wear that shirt on video, you have to take it off or put on something over it? Look, this is already a very white crowd, you cannot wear an explicitly racist t-shirt here.
It's okay, we're going to play Battle Hymn of the Republic. All right, well, that's our episode, ladies and gentlemen. Victor, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at TheVictasticK, and you can find my music on Spotify, Bandcamp, and Patreon at James Gameboy. Yay.
No, you're in the band, though, Victor, so the correct answer is you can find all our stuff at lipstickgeneration.com and under the name Lipstick Generation on most social media accounts.
That's
or
right.
at Mr. Cool Rock and Roll if it doesn't, whatever.
Right. If there are character limits, Mr. Cool Rock and Roll.
All right, that's our episode. Bye, Internet.
Jazz is an accident.
Waiting to happen.
Yes. Waiting to have happened.
Thanks for listening to the Lipstick Panel, hosted by Lipstick Generation. Lipstick Generation's music can be found on all major streaming platforms and at lipstickgeneration.com. If you're listening to the podcast on YouTube, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know your ranking of the subject in the comments down below. Feel free to leave us an episode suggestion also. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app, please leave a review and tell a friend about our show. Thanks and rock on!